I went to Home Depot and I bought a 10 by 10 shed and I put it in my parents' backyard in New Orleans. And that was my first warehouse. And I sold my first pair in June of 2008.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in.
Okay, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Kyle Berner, the founder over at Feelgoodz. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Pat. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you on today. Can you start out by giving us an overview? What is Feelgoodz?
Sure. Feelgoodz is a sustainable lifestyle brand, and we make footwear and accessories in countries like Vietnam, Thailand, Turkey, Nepal, and India. We bring it to market and we sell it across the country here in the US.
I love it. Can you tell us the story of how you got started with the company?
Yeah, sure. So it was December 2007 and I was backpacking in Thailand and my one and only pair of flip-flops busted. One of those flip-flop blowouts, right? And it was the only pair of shoes that I had with me at the time just because I travel really light. And so I started shopping for a new pair of flip-flops and I turned this corner and I come across this tree with flip-flops hanging from the branches of the tree. It was a fake tree, but it still caught my eye nonetheless. And I walked up and I tried a pair on. And as soon as I did, I was struck by the comfort first and foremost. They were the most comfortable flip-flops I'd ever put on my feet. I'm a flip-flop guy and I always have been. And that was the first thing that struck me. And secondly, the tree struck me. So in my broken Thai, I struck up a conversation with the vendor and I said, tell me about these flip-flops and why are they so comfortable and why do you have this tree here? And he told me that they were made from premium natural rubber tapped from rubber trees in the southern part of the country. And at the time, I had no idea that rubber even came from a tree. And I was really struck by that. And I thought it was the coolest thing. And I just really wanted to learn more about it because I loved the comfort of the product. I loved the style of it. It was the traditional Zori Japanese style flip-flop that I had always loved. And I was, inspired to learn more. So I went back to my guest house and I tracked down the manufacturer of the product and I just cold called them. And I said, hey, I'm Kyle and I just bought some flip-flops of yours and I love them and I want to talk to you about potentially selling them in the USA. And so the very next day I was meeting with the manufacturer of the product. And the more I learned, the more I loved. And I took a bus trip down to the southern part of Thailand to go visit the rubber farms to learn how the whole process was made. And I learned that there was an entire microeconomy of rubber farmers that made a living as a rubber tapper. And I just thought it was such a cool thing. And I really thought that people in the States would love a more sustainable alternative that was really comfortable and really high quality than what was previously on the market at that time. And so I ordered 300 pairs, which was my minimum order at the time. I went to Home Depot and I bought a 10 by 10 shed and I put it in my parents' backyard in New Orleans. And that was my first warehouse. And I sold my first pair in June of 2008. So the sort of aha moment was December 2007. And then June 2008 is when I sold my first pair. And that's how I got started.
I love that. I love that. Well, there it is. To all the people that are wondering, oh, should I take that backpacking trip a little bit after school, whether it's high school, college, and just go see the world? Yeah, maybe you'll start a new business that'll end up panning out pretty well for you. Oh, man. Well, let's fast forward just a smidge, because what was so cool to me is from a pretty early stage, fact check me on this one, Kyle, but I believe it was 2009, you get approached by Whole Foods and they reach out and they say, hey, we really want to carry your products in a handful of our stores. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So one of the first things that I wanted to do when the 300 pairs of flip-flops showed up at my parents' house was I really wanted to get the story out there about how I was getting this started because I thought it was a pretty cool story. And I said, well, all right, how am I going to do that? So what I did was I cold called the fashion editor of the local newspaper in New Orleans called the Times-Picayune. And I don't know how many times I cold called, but I cold called a lot because I thought that the people in New Orleans would enjoy reading about the story. And so I got her on the phone, I gave her the elevator pitch, and I guess I struck a nerve. And so she said, okay, Kyle, let's set up another interview a couple weeks down the line. So I did that, and fast forward, and just a few weeks later, my story ended up on the front page of the newspaper, of that Times-Picayune newspaper in New Orleans. And the article was called The Flip-Flop Man. And it was a picture of me with flip-flops all around my face. And the article struck a nerve. It got picked up by the Associated Press and funneled around the world, all the way from Japan to Hawaii. Well, as luck would have it, that article made its way across the desk of the buyer of Whole Foods. And at the time that the article came across her desk, that buyer had just brought in Tom's shoes at the time. And back in 2009, Tom's was exploding. So the buyer thought, well, okay, well, if a shoe line can work in a grocery store environment, surely flip-flops can work. So around that time is when our article came across her desk. The timing was just perfect. So in February 2009, I'm not even a year in business, and I'm operating out of my parents' backyard at a shed, right? And I get this email from the regional buyer of Whole Foods and said, hey, I just came across your article. I really love your story, and I'd love to consider bringing your flip-flops into our stores. And so that's how it happened. So May 2009 is when we launched in 17 of their stores in the Southwest region of Whole Foods, which is like the Texas and Louisiana area. And now I think they have in the 40s, in the 50s of stores. But at the time, it was 17. So that's how we got in.
I'd love to dive a little bit behind the scenes. So, you get this regional buyer of Whole Foods who reaches out to you. They say, hey, we really like your flip-flops. We want to learn more. We want to carry them in stores. What does the process look like from there? Did they fly you out to their offices and you had to do an in-person pitch in front of 20 people? What does that process look like?
All right. So we can all agree, Field of Dreams was a great movie, but man, were those guys wrong. Just because you built it does not mean that they will come. Hey, this is Pat, the host of Customer Growth Sessions. Our agency, Intergrowth, has been helping e-commerce brands like Bella Bridesmaids, Brevity, and JS Dental to get more customers online since 2016. Interested in seeing how we'd help you? Head over to intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary consultation with me. That's intergrowth.com/CGS. All right, back to the show.
We had some samples and we immediately set up a meeting, went out there, and basically with just like a bag of flip-flops and put them across the desk. And so she could touch and feel the quality and the comfort. We had worked out the pricing beforehand of what we needed based upon our margin structure, and just had a really straightforward conversation about how to bring this program to life, because she had never brought in flip-flops before. We had never sold flip-flops in their stores before. So we were basically learning together as to how to do it. And the whole idea was, well, let's test it, right? We worked out the numbers. The pricing was there. She loved the quality. We had one style and a few different colors, so the SKU count wasn't too complex. And that's how we made it happen, was just having a meeting at that time in Austin, and we rolled it out like that.
Now, when you think back to that meeting in Austin, were there any questions or requests that kind of blindsided you at the time? Maybe that for listeners who are in a similar boat where they're about to go meet with a buyer for the first time, that you'd say, hey, here are some really good things to make sure that you have ready to go. You mentioned making sure your margins are there, but let's talk through some of those elements.
I think one of the things that was really important to us from the beginning was, what does the product look like once it's in the store, right? And so little things down to hangers and hang tags, and what does that all look like, and where's it going to hang, and how's it going to hang, and what does the hang tag say? Because that's really the story that you're able to tell at the time that a customer walks up. So we put a lot of time and effort into those little details so that when we launched and when customers went in, they could create a connection to the product, because I'm not going to be able to be there every single day in every single store to tell the story. But I did do something cool, and we could talk about that later. But it was just really paying attention to the details of how the product would come to life in the store, knowing that this was a grocery store and it's a different type of a category that's in there. So I knew that we really needed to take a lot of time to think through the merchandising a little bit and make sure that we were coming correct.
So fast forward, I guess it's ballpark, let's say 15 years. I mean, you guys are in, I think it was like 500 different locations I saw of Whole Foods. Like the business has exploded in the best way possible. So Kyle, what I loved about when you and I were first talking is I had kind of come to you and said, hey, I really want to have you tell your story of getting into Whole Foods. And you brought up a really excellent point, which was getting into Whole Foods, getting into any sort of big retailer. It's a big accomplishment. It takes a lot of work. By no means is it easy, but the story that not a lot of people talk about is how do you actually stay in that retailer once you've landed in there to begin with. So I'd love to shift the focus over to that and some of the challenges you've run into along the way. Maybe let's start out with, I'm picturing like sports analogy. Like, let's say there's a listener here who just got into, we'll keep Whole Foods out of the equation in case there's anything special for them that you don't feel comfortable disclosing. But let's say there's someone else here. They just got into Target. They're going to be in 20 different Target locations. Give them the ground rules. What does success look like? What are some of the like baseline things that they need to make sure that they're doing so that they don't lose their spot there?
Yeah. I think the key to us was, what is it like in the store, right? Who is selling it? What does the product look like? What do you have control over or not have control over? So one of the best decisions that we made when we did that 17 store launch was we went and visited every single of those 17 stores and set up a little demo next to our product and was basically just like putting flip-flops in people's baskets, right? And a big part of that was to kind of create a buzz. But another part of that was to talk to the people in the store and to learn as much as we can learn. And one of the things that we really understood was that there's a lot of styles and sizes and colors, right? And so managing that inventory for a store that is primarily focused on food and body care and supplements, I could see that that could become a challenge down the line as we grew. So my first focus was to make sure that 17 store test was a success because I knew that there was a bigger picture at play. That at the time there were, I think, 375 stores at that time. And so my entire focus was do whatever it takes to make that launch successful. So going on that road trip, we rented a van and we covered it in flip-flop decals and we dumped it the Flopmobile and we went around with a video camera and did this whole thing and went to every store. And so that proved to work because the sales were really good that summer. And then I was able to use the sales from that test to then leverage that to scale. So I thought, okay, well, I was already thinking beyond the 17. It was, let me do well here, but what happens after the 17? Can we go from 17 to 30 or 17 to 50? And I started asking around, like, how do we do that? And one of the pieces of feedback we got was, there's a trade show called the Natural Products Expo. You should go to that show because many Whole Foods buyers will be there and you should bring your data. And so we did that. So we launched in May of 2009. And then in September 2009, we went to something called the Natural Products Expo East in Boston with our data. And so we were able to meet with some of the other Whole Foods buyers in other regions and use the data, our sell-through data, to then begin to scale. So there was a period of time for a few years where that's what we did. We just scaled little by little from 17 stores to 30 to 50 to 75 and so on. And as we grew, they became more complex, obviously. And what we were noticing was the reorders. So the product would sell down, right? And what would happen is either a reorder wouldn't come in, which bothered us, right? Or a reorder would come in, but it was never really what the store needed, right? So let's say you send in 50 pairs of flip-flops and there's 3 styles and 3 colors and 6 sizes, right? Well, let's say that 30 of those pairs sell down. A store says, I need to go order more flip-flops, and they go to their little system and they go to order it. A reorder would come through and get so excited. Man, a reorder came in, but it would be like, give me 10 black and 10 blue and like all 8s or all 7s. Let me just fill up the display. And I was like, man, wait a minute. Something's not right here. I love the fact that we're getting the reorders. Don't get me wrong. We're not refilling the store with what the customer is actually going to need. And so I decided at the time of this inventory complexity, I decided to go and live on the road for about a year. This is in around 2013 or so. We had scaled to a couple hundred Whole Food stores, and I went store to store trying to figure out how we could solve this problem. And the most common feedback that I got was, I love your product. It sells really well. I just don't have time to manage it. Right. And so when I send the reorders, I'm basically just sending an exasperated guess as to what it is that we need. Just send me something. Okay. But it just began to kind of kick the can down the road, because then sales would drop, right? Because you're not giving the customer the selection that they need at that time if you're ordering 10 blacks in a size 7, right? So I thought, man, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I was back in Austin at the time, having traveled to a couple hundred Whole Food stores at that time. And I was meeting with a regional buyer, and my hair was all over the place. I was exhausted, and I was telling her what I found. And she was like, she's like, if you can figure out a way to send me your sell-through data by UPC on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, I will send you purchase orders, right? By store, by SKU of what has sold during that week. And I knew that, so Whole Foods gives you access to like a vendor portal, which gives you the sales data by UPC by store. So she challenged me and said, if you can figure out a way to pull all that together and kind of tee up a big Excel spreadsheet with all the stores across it and with the SKUs of what every store needs, given what they've sold, she's like, I'll give you weekly or biweekly purchase orders on a regional level, and let's just take the stores out of it. And so that was a turning point for us, because I went back to my team. I said, this is a big deal. We got to figure this out. So we went out and we created our own software platform that we now own called Shelf Replen, which essentially ties in what we ship to Whole Food stores combined with what has sold through Whole Food stores on a weekly basis. And the gap between what we shipped in to what we have sold through is what we call our suggested reorder, right? And so what our system does is it reads that and it turns it into essentially a big Excel file with all the stores across it. And then that Excel file gets forwarded to the buyer, and then the buyer then gives us purchase orders based upon that data. And now we have that running across all 500 Whole Food stores.
How interesting to hear that you were dealing with seemingly like this same issue in almost every store, and that you were able to get in contact with that one person who was able to say, hey, get me these various data points. You build out a custom software for it, and then boom, from there, it's like, wow, problem solved. That's amazing.
Yeah. And so the couple of years after we started to launch that, sales just spiked. And so what we've done along the way is just sort of try to tweak things. And for example, we created point of purchase displays that we pay for. We ship to them on our dime. They give us the space, and the space is very small. It's 1.5 square foot of space, but it's on wheels. And what it does is it gives us our own home within the store. So we're not tucked away next to the body care and supplements. And because I knew that our item is impulse, right? And we needed to get eyeballs on it, because I could prove, especially from my year living on the road, that if you get the product in people's eyeballs and while they're shopping, that the product moves. It really does sell. And so this display allows us to do that, and you can move it around and you can test it in different areas of the store. And so we have that display across all the stores as well. So we have that display. We manage that display for Whole Foods. All Whole Foods has to do is get the display, put it up, put their product up. And then when we send the reorders to them, they have to restock it and make it look good. And that's all they have to do. And we bring them the results. So that's the model that's running to this day.
So along those lines, I would imagine you put a lot of resources into, I would imagine it's like various reps on the team that are like going out to locations on maybe a semi-recurring basis to ultimately check the display, make sure it hasn't gotten damaged, make sure it hasn't accidentally been tucked away in the corner. Have you found there's any software of the sort that helps you to like really manage that process?
There are a number of like merchandising groups out there that have their own software platform that they use to sort of like to record their audits, right? And so we do partner with their national merchandising team that has their own platform. They're actually in stores as we speak right now, because we had a new drop going in over the past couple of weeks. So they're there right now. They take pictures of the display. of what it looks like when they get there. Their job is to merchandise the product and make it look good and move the display into an area of high traffic, and then take a picture of what it looks like before they leave. And all that gets uploaded into their system. And then we get access to that reporting so that we can get it. And then we can gain insights from that and look at the sales data and make correlations where it's, okay, this store has a display and look, they put it right by the registers and look at their sales. Whereas this store doesn't have a display. They put it back by the frozen foods and look at their sales. So we're able to take that data and then make little tweaks to grow same store sales, right? Along the way. Because all those little tweaks I've learned living on the road that I did really makes a big difference with the sell through. But the merchandising is an absolute key to that to assist the stores in the execution.
People ask me all the time, should I be using ChatGPT to create content for my site? So here's the thing. AI is great at quickly spitting out blog content. It's also great at pissing off your following. If you've spent years building your brand and follower base, why would you risk that all with AI-generated content? At Intergrowth, we work with companies that see their brand as an asset to get more customers through human-crafted articles that your customers look for online. We master your brand voice and work with your team to write the best articles on the internet that bring you customers on autopilot from search engines like Google. Interested in hearing more? Reach out to us at intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary strategy session with our team.
I'm curious, in the time that you've been in Whole Foods, 15, 16 years, have there been any competing brands that have made it into the same general shelf space as you guys? If so, how did you approach that?
The answer is yes, there have been. Over the past 15 years, there have been 4 or 5 other brands that have at least gotten tests in other areas of Whole Foods. Luckily to say, those 4 or 5 brands are not in Whole Foods to this day. But I think that such a big part of our success is really doubling down on what the product looks like in the store, what the price points are, how is it merchandised, how do we keep the display full, and our relationship along the way with those stores down to the store level. They know us. And so they're more likely to try to work with us on finding solutions versus a brand that may just ship product in and call it a day, right? And so, yes, there have been other brands that have come in, but I think that our safeguard has been just our relentless focus of putting every resource that we can into making that account work and the relationships that we've built along the way.
That's amazing. Now, from your end, is there maybe a series of like specific benchmarks or metrics that, and it could be Whole Foods, it could just be big box retailers as a whole. Is there like a certain set of metrics that you would say outside of the relationships that you're building that your performance is really graded on? So maybe internally, someone at Whole Foods is saying, oh, we sold X number of Feelgoodz. We were looking to sell this many. Yeah, I'm curious if there are numbers like that, at least that you know of. Maybe they have some numbers hidden behind the scenes that they don't share with all the businesses they partner with.
Nothing specific. I know that we need to comp year over year unit sales, right? So if we sell 500,000 units in year 1, we need to sell 500,000 units plus in year 2 and so on. That's sort of the big piece. For our brand specifically, the reason that I think that they like a product like ours is because it is a $30 or $40 or $50 ring for them. It doesn't turn or move nearly as fast as like the $3 or $4 or $5 gallon of milk, right? But it's a basket builder, right? So they've got their milk and their cheese and their kombucha and everything else that may be $100, but then all of a sudden you put a pair of Feelgoodz in there and all of a sudden it goes to $130. And so they love it for that reason. And they're able to offer their guests a surprise and something of value that they wouldn't expect to find in going in. Because remember, no one's going in there with like Feelgoodz on the grocery list. I mean, maybe they are now since we've been in there for so long. I have talked to so many customers that go in every year just to get their pair of Feelgoodz. But it's really about basket building and how to drive that number up. And so when we go to create collections, it's about how do we turn the 30 to 35? How do we turn that 30 to 40, for example? And let's build the assortments around that, because that's just, again, it's the $100 ticket to $140 ticket. And they love that. And the space that we take up is so small, right? And it's on wheels. It can be moved around. So we're able to offer them something really, really interesting. So I think it's comping unit sales, and then it's a focus on that end receipt.
Now, this is a broad question, but I want to open it up and ask you, are there any challenges, let's say specifically in maintaining your presence in Whole Foods? Are there any challenges that have totally blindsided you that you'd feel comfortable sharing right now?
I think that the biggest challenge that we have had and have had to deal with is we are on terms, which is called guaranteed sale. So what that means is that at the end of each season, right? So for flip-flops, it's typically seasonal, right? So you've got March until, call it Labor Day, right? And now we do have a slipper collection as well, which we've bolted on over the past several years, which is, say, September through February. Well, at the end of each of those seasons and at the end of our exit promotion, any SKUs that are remaining in each store, the stores are able to send back to us for store credit. And that credit gets applied to future invoices. That's been a huge challenge for us. Probably the biggest challenge is figuring out a way to maximize sales, but also minimize the returns that happen at the end of each season. And that has been one thing that that shelf replenish system that I mentioned earlier has really helped us with, because we're able to really see, at least virtually real time, what the inventory levels are like in each store. So we know what levers to pull. So if it's August and a store is super, super heavy on inventory, we're not going to send them a reorder, right? Because this is all going to come back. It's having a super, super laser-like focus on ensuring that display sells down appropriately so that our returns at the end of each season stay manageable. Because there has been times where it's just buried us and it's been really, really tough to try to crawl out of. But and we've had 15 years of practice doing this. So we've gotten it down to a fairly reasonable percentage, but that continues to be the biggest challenge that we have had, is managing those seasonal returns that come back.
Well, and I was going to say, I can imagine, especially for the first couple of seasons, it was probably a little heartbreaking to see like, oh, we got this huge order from all these different stores. And then end of the year, it's like, oh, hey, we owe a little bit of money back.
Right.
It's like the IRS man comes twice to your business every year. That's
I know, total heartbreaking moments, because you're saying, they're selling so well, send them more. They're selling so well, send them more. The reorders come in, your instinct is you want to send them that reorder. But there are times when you kind of have to pull the brakes a little bit and say, do they really need it? Do they really need it?
Oh, man. Well, Kyle, this has been amazing. Can you give us a little bit of an inside look? What's in the pipeline for Feelgoodz? Can you let us know about any upcoming products maybe that you haven't announced yet? Or what are you excited about in 2025?
So a few things. So we have entered into the hospitality space over the past few years. And think of Beverly Hills Hotel and Montage and some really, really nice resort and spa properties around the country. We have built an entire collection based upon lifestyle amenities, everything from spa slides to Turkish towels to retail programs. So a big part of our brand that you'll start to see in the coming months is our growth in the hospitality space. That's number one. Number two is that we are flip-flop, specifically out of Thailand. We're working to become the very first regenerative rubber flip-flop in the world come 2026. So we spent the better part of a year and some change building out a regenerative rubber supply chain in southern Thailand. And the pieces are in place to have that all set up and ready to go for flip-flops in 2026. So that's a big piece that you'll see in our brand throughout this year too, in promoting that.
Wow, that's incredible. The first regenerative flip-flop. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Kyle, this has been amazing. For listeners maybe that want to get their first pair of Feelgoodz, where should they go to actually buy from you guys?
Yeah, well, you can go to your local Whole Foods store, or you can go to www.feelgoodz.com. We'll have an entire selection there. We'll have little mini product drops happening throughout the season with new collections. So check back every so often. But I would certainly recommend, if you haven't tried Feelgoodz or heard of Feelgoodz or have been a fan before, to try it with our signature natural rubber flip-flops, either in classics or slims, because you will have at least 1, 2, or 3 pairs in your house at all times moving forward, because they're the best on the market.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm overdue for a pair of flip-flops. You'll be seeing an order with my name on it the next time I'm back in the US.
There we go.
Kyle, this has been amazing. Listeners, once again, this is Kyle Berner, the founder over at Feelgoodz. Kyle, thank you for coming on today.
Thanks, Pat. It was a blast.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.